We're now going to be heading out of Chapter 1, which was dealing with the Civil War and Reconstruction, and we're going to focus on Chapter 2, which is settling the West. This time period that we're going to look at is specific about in the United States from 1860 to 1900, so we have a little bit of overlap with Reconstruction. Some of the key questions that we're going to talk about during this chapter are what kind of conflicts might the settlers have in terms of finding enough food and resources to live? And number two, what challenges might they face from Native Americans or other settlers? At the end of we talked about Reconstruction in the last part when we were talking about Jim Crow and a group of African Americans that were settling to Kansas or on their way to Kansas that were stopped and attacked by whites, killing them on the way. So this is going to be a frequent problem we're going to have. Miners, ranchers, and farmers are going to lead the way to expansion of the Western territories. Homesteading allows settlers to claim areas of land and cultivate and build new lives. With the building of railroads and connect to the western states in the east, the populations are going to grow quickly. For centuries, this land was home to many other groups of Native Americans. The settling of the West altered their way of life forever. So we're going to look at how things were changed and how we affected the different groups. One of the groups that we're going to talk about the whole idea of Custer and Sitting Bull, which was part of Custer's last stand. So in looking at this, we're going to talk about specifically the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Battle of Little Bighorn was fought in June 25th of 1876 near the Little Bighorn River in the Montana Territory. It pitted federal troops by Lieutenant Colonel George Custer against a band of Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. Tensions between the two groups had been rising since the discovery of gold on Native American lands. When a number of tribes missed a federal deadline to move the reservation, the United States, including Custer and the 7th Cavalry, was dispatched to confront them. Custer was unaware of the number of Indians fighting under the command of Sitting Bull at Little Bighorn, and his forces were outnumbered and quickly overwhelmed in what became known as Custer's last stand. So Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse were the leaders of the Sioux tribe on the Great Plains, and they strongly resisted in the mid-19th century the efforts of the U.S. government to confine their people to different reservations, moving them from their homeland to reservations. 1875, gold was discovered in this Black Hills, so the U.S. Army ignored previous treaty agreements and invaded that region. This betrayal by the United States government led to many of the Sioux and Cheyenne I can't talk today, tribesmen leave their reservations and join Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse in Montana as sort of a stand. By the late spring of 1876, more than 10,000 Native Americans had gathered in a camp along the Little Bighorn River, which they called the Greasy Grass, in defiance of the U.S. Department of War, and it returned their reservation or else being attacked. So what we're going to look at is the primary source documents and the quotes that are coming back from this battle. So from Sitting Bull, when you're talking about that, Sitting Bull, his state was, my heart is full of sorrow that so many were killed on each side, but when they compel us to fight, we must fight. Tonight we shall mourn our dead, and for those brave white men lying on yonder on the hillside. And on the other side, you have historical documents from Custer, and what his first statement was, George Custer, while declining reinforcements for the Battle of Little Bighorn, he thought it was going to be an easy victory, and he said the 7th can handle anything it meets. After this event, of course, there's a different quote, and it says, it is the opinion of the headquarters among those that are most familiar with the situation that Custer struck Sitting Bull's main camp. Custer dropped squarely into the midst of no less than 10,000 Red Devils and was literally torn to pieces. The movement made by Custer is censored to some extent at military headquarters in this city. So, again, to reiterate, what you're going to see is the United States, the population of the East Coast, trying to move westward. We have this with African Americans, and we also have that with the poor and impoverished who are just searching out for a better land, a better life. So if they're given the property of the chance to have prosperity and have land of their own, they're going to move. The problem, of course, is they're going to encounter different tribes of groups of Indians. And what we're going to do is the U.S. government is going to promise the Indians that they're going to do a lot of different things for them. And in the fact, what they do is they kind of just keep relocating them. So we're going to have a lot of interactions with the Indian, and you're going to see how that changes the way our settlement patterns and our culture affects or interacts with other people for a long time to come.